In this episode, we are taking apart one of the most important security topics in everyday networking because wireless security is something users depend on constantly. Yet many beginners only see the password prompt and assume that is the whole protection model. When a phone, laptop, printer, or tablet joins a wireless network, several security decisions sit behind that simple connection, and those decisions shape how well the network resists eavesdropping, unauthorized access, and misuse. Terms like Wi-Fi Protected Access 2, WPA2, Wi-Fi Protected Access 3, WPA3, Advanced Encryption Standard, AES, and Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, TKIP, can sound like exam vocabulary at first, but they really describe how a wireless network protects data and controls trust. For a new technician, the goal is not just to recognize the names. The goal is to understand what role each one plays, why some are stronger than others, and why a secure wireless connection depends on both good encryption and good identity handling rather than just one or the other. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.News in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to begin is with the idea that wireless security has to solve two different problems at the same time. First, it must protect the data moving through the air so that nearby strangers cannot easily read or tamper with what users are sending. Second, it must decide who is allowed to join the network in the first place. These are related problems, but they are not identical. A network could use strong encryption for traffic and still handle identity poorly, which would mean the right kind of lock is on the door, but the wrong people are still getting keys. On the other hand, a network could be selective about who joins but still use weak protection for the traffic itself, which would mean trusted users are on a network that still exposes too much information. This is why technicians need to stop thinking of wireless security as nothing more than a password. Real wireless security is built from both cryptographic protection for the data and an authentication approach that decides how trust is granted. When people hear WPA2 and WPA3, they are hearing the names of wireless security standards that define how protected access to a Wi-Fi network should work. These standards were created because older approaches proved too weak over time, and wireless networks needed stronger ways to defend both traffic and access. A standard matters because it gives a known framework for how the network and the client device should protect their communication. That means these names are not just labels on a router screen. They reflect generations of security thinking about what threats need to be addressed and how devices should establish protected wireless sessions. In practical terms, a technician should understand WPA2 as the long-standing secure baseline that replaced weaker earlier approaches in many environments, while WPA3 represents a newer and stronger generation intended to improve wireless protections further. Both matter because many real environments still contain a mix of old and new devices, and support decisions often depend on understanding the difference between what is common and what is stronger. WPA2 became widely important because it brought stronger wireless protection into ordinary use and moved away from older methods that had become too weak to trust. For many years, it was the standard answer for securing a wireless network properly, especially when used with AES rather than older legacy options. A technician should think of WPA2 as a mature security framework that significantly improved wireless safety compared with earlier designs. But that does not mean it should be treated as perfect forever. Security changes because attackers learn, hardware improves, and weaknesses that once seemed theoretical become more practical over time. That is why standards evolve. WPA2 remains relevant because it is still present in many homes, offices, devices, and exam objectives, and because technicians will absolutely encounter it in real support work. However, the deeper lesson is that technology security is never frozen. Something can be strong for its time, widely trusted, and still later be improved upon because better protection becomes available and older assumptions no longer hold as well. WPA3 is the newer standard, and it exists because wireless networks benefit from stronger default protection and better resistance against some attack methods that have troubled earlier approaches. The exact technical details behind those improvements matter more to specialists. But the beginner-level lesson is that WPA3 was designed to strengthen how trust is established and how wireless access resists certain common weaknesses, especially in situations where attackers try to guess passwords or exploit poor connection behavior. In other words, WPA3 does not just continue WPA2 with a new name. It reflects an effort to make secure wireless behavior more robust by design. A technician should recognize that when WPA3 is available and supported by the environment, it is generally preferred over WPA2 because it brings stronger protections to the table. At the same time, real support work requires awareness that not all older devices support it, which means technicians often have to balance stronger security goals with the reality of compatibility in mixed device environments. Encryption is the part of this story that protects the confidentiality and integrity of wireless traffic. Because wireless signals travel through open space, anyone nearby may be able to receive the signal physically, even if they are not meant to understand it. Encryption solves that by making the data unreadable to unauthorized parties, so even if the signal is captured, the information itself is not easily exposed. This is why wireless encryption is so central to security. Without it, the network may still ask who you are, but the actual traffic could remain vulnerable to observation or interference. Strong encryption is what turns radio communication into protected communication. For technicians, the key point is that wireless security is not just about keeping unauthorized users off the network. It is also about protecting the actual information of authorized users while it moves between the device and the access point. Secure wireless depends on this protection because the medium itself is naturally exposed in a way that wired traffic inside a cable is not. AES is the encryption choice most strongly associated with modern secure wireless operation, especially when talking about well-configured WPA2 and WPA3 environments. At the beginner level, the easiest way to understand AES is as the stronger and more trusted encryption option that technicians should recognize as the preferred modern choice in comparison with older legacy alternatives. It protects data more effectively because it represents a more robust approach that has become the standard expectation for secure wireless traffic. When a technician sees AES connected with wireless security, that should signal a better security posture than older outdated options. The reason it matters is not just because an exam may ask for the stronger choice. It matters because the strength of encryption directly affects how hard it is for an outsider to make sense of captured traffic or interfere meaningfully with communication. Good encryption does real work in the background every moment a user is connected, even though the user may never notice it happening. TKIP, by contrast, is the kind of term technicians need to recognize mainly so they understand why it is no longer the preferred answer. TKIP was introduced as an improvement during an earlier period when wireless security needed something better than what came before, but it did not age well as a long-term modern solution. That is a useful lesson by itself. In security, some technologies serve as transitional steps rather than permanent foundations. TKIP helped address older weaknesses at the time, but over the years it became clear that stronger approaches were needed, which is why AES became the better answer for modern secure wireless configurations. Beginners sometimes get tripped up because they assume all security-sounding options are roughly equivalent if they are available on the same screen. That is not true. A feature can exist for backward compatibility while still representing weaker protection. When technicians see TKIP, they should hear a warning about age and legacy dependence rather than a sign of modern best practice. This comparison between AES and TKIP matters because it shows how wireless security depends on both the standard being used and the encryption choice inside that standard. A beginner may hear that a network uses WPA2 and assume that is enough information to judge it as secure, but the fuller picture includes whether it is paired with stronger modern encryption or with weaker older options. Security decisions rarely stand on one label alone. They are often combinations of choices, and the safest path usually means the standard and the encryption method are both aligned with current expectations. A network using WPA2 with AES is a much healthier picture than one leaning on old compatibility modes. A network using WPA3 pushes that protection further when devices support it. The broader lesson is that technicians should learn to look past the surface label and ask what is actually happening underneath. Good support work is not just reading the setting name. It is understanding whether the combination of settings creates a strong or weak security outcome. Authentication is the other half of wireless security, and this is where pre-shared key, PSK, and enterprise methods come in. Encryption protects the traffic, but authentication answers who is permitted to join the network and how that permission is granted. With PSK, the basic idea is simple. Devices join the network using a shared secret, usually a wireless password known by authorized users. This works well enough for many home and small office environments because it is straightforward, familiar, and easy to explain. Everyone approved for the network gets the same shared secret, and if that secret matches, access is granted. The strength of this model depends heavily on choosing a strong password and keeping it controlled. If the password is weak, widely shared, written on a wall, or never changed after being exposed, the whole trust model becomes shaky. PSK is convenient, but convenience comes with trade-offs because one shared secret does not identify individual users with much precision. That shared secret model is exactly why enterprise wireless authentication exists. Enterprise methods are designed for environments where it is not enough to say that anyone with the common network password is trusted. Instead, the organization wants identity to be tied more closely to individual users, devices, or centrally managed credentials. In practical terms, that means the network can make more refined decisions about who gets in, and the organization can revoke, track, or change access in a more controlled way. This matters because real organizations have turnover, role changes, lost devices, and security incidents. If a former employee leaves and the network relies only on one shared password, the organization may have to change that password everywhere and redistribute it to everyone else. Enterprise methods reduce that kind of blunt disruption because trust can be managed more granularly. For a technician, the key insight is that enterprise authentication is not just a more complicated version of PSK. It exists because larger or more security-conscious environments need identity handling that goes beyond a single secret known by many people. This leads to a very important point for beginners. Secure wireless depends on both strong encryption and good identity handling because each one protects against a different kind of weakness. Strong encryption without good authentication means the traffic may be well protected, but unauthorized or poorly tracked users could still end up on the network. Good authentication without strong encryption means trusted users may connect successfully, but their traffic could still be exposed more than it should be. The safest environments combine both. They use strong modern standards, strong encryption, and an authentication approach that fits the organization's size, risk, and management needs. This is why technicians should avoid oversimplified thinking such as asking only whether the Wi-Fi password is strong. That matters, but it is only one piece of the puzzle. A better question is whether the network is using a strong security standard, strong encryption, and an identity method appropriate for the environment. Real wireless security is the result of those decisions working together rather than one isolated setting doing all the work. A common beginner misconception is that wireless security is mainly about keeping neighbors or strangers from borrowing internet access. That is part of it, especially in home settings. But the real issue is much broader. Wireless networks often carry business traffic, private communications, account credentials, internal application access, and sensitive personal or organizational data. A weak wireless setup can expose more than bandwidth. It can expose opportunities for interception, unauthorized access, and movement toward other systems. Another misconception is that once a device connects successfully, the network must therefore be secure. Connection success only proves compatibility and acceptance, not quality of protection. A device can connect to a poorly secured network just as easily as to a well-secured one. That is why technicians need to think critically about what kind of wireless protection is in place rather than assuming that a functioning Wi-Fi connection is evidence of a safe one. Security and connectivity are related, but they are not the same thing. It also helps to remember that support work often involves mixed environments where strong preferences meet practical limitations. A technician may know that WPA3 is stronger, but older devices may still require WPA2. The technician may understand that enterprise authentication is better for individual identity control, but a very small office may still use PSK because it fits the scale and simplicity of the environment. This does not mean the technician should ignore best practices. It means support decisions often involve balancing security strength with device capability, user needs, and organizational maturity. The right answer is not always the most advanced option on paper if the environment genuinely cannot support it yet. However, the technician should still understand what the stronger target looks like and why legacy or convenience-based choices carry more risk. That understanding helps support teams explain trade-offs honestly rather than pretending that all available options are equally safe simply because they are still present in the configuration menu. As we close, the main lesson is that wireless security makes much more sense when you separate it into its two core jobs and then see how the parts fit together. WPA2 and WPA3 are security standards that shape how protected wireless access is handled, with WPA3 representing the newer and generally stronger direction. AES is the modern preferred encryption choice that protects wireless traffic far better than legacy options like TKIP, which technicians should recognize as outdated and weaker. PSK offers a simple shared secret way to control access, while enterprise authentication gives organizations more precise identity handling and better control over who can join the network. Secure wireless depends on both sides of this model because encryption protects the data and authentication protects the trust boundary. When technicians understand that balance clearly, they stop seeing Wi-Fi security as just a password problem and start seeing it as a combination of standards, cryptography, and identity decisions that together determine whether the network is genuinely safe.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.